Perfect.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Hannah. I appreciate the invitation. And it's fantastic to see everybody on the line here. It's always good to talk to everybody. So as Hannah said, like just please jump into the conversation as you wish. I know that this could devolve into a venting session, so we're going to keep an eye on it and see how it goes. And also, I don't usually use Zoom. I use Blackboard and I use Teams. So if I'm a little bit clunky with moving around between things, just cut me some slack, okay? So I just wanted to start off by saying that the information that I'm giving here today is just coming from my 10 years of experience doing this work. It's not the opinion of my employer. And another proviso is that from time to time, I may talk about my own experiences working with a particular vendor, but I won't share any specifics about our negotiations or anything like that. And also, as I was finishing up my notes for this presentation, I realized that the entire presentation revolves around electronic products and platform negotiations. So I apologize if that focus was not made clear in the blurb that went around. So we'll move forward here. So, and I also have two computers going at the same time. So give me a little bit to organize myself. So the objectives of this session. So we're going to review the electronic resources negotiation form that I use at Windsor Law Library. We're going to consider the preparation phase of negotiation. We're going to share some best practices and tips for contract negotiation. And we're going to recognize some negotiation tactics used by vendors. We're going to talk a little bit about the follow-up and tracking phase of negotiation. And then I'm also going to review some of the electronic resources checklists that we use at our law library. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that all of the information that I'm providing and sharing today is found on a website that I created for this webinar. So the link is here. It's called the Toolkit, and it's sitting on the Law Library's website. I'm not sure if you guys would actually be able to link to that. So maybe I'll leave the screen up for a little bit for you to be able to take that URL down. But actually, I think what would be better is if I actually shared the website itself. So it's going to come up here in a second. So the URL is at the top. And then once you get to that URL, hopefully you can see it okay. Let me just up the size on this for a second, because if you can get yourself to it, maybe Hannah could stick it in the chat as well. So on this particular website, I put a few resources, including the slides. So the slides are at the bottom, 4 different checklists, my negotiation form that I use, as well as a document that the vendor liaison committee put together back in 2017. So I am going to leave that for now. The other thing that I have put on this slide is a little mini article about negotiation that's coming from Harvard Law School program on negotiation. And it's called 10 Hard Bargaining Tactics to Watch Out For in a Negotiation. So I've put that link for you as well. But I'll keep mentioning throughout the presentation that, of course, there are thousands of articles on the web, in journals. There's hundreds of books written about the topic. This is just one that was an easy read for me to pull a few things out of it. So the first thing that I did put together or make sure that I pointed out in all of this is the vendor liaison committees. They had put together a document that was all about, let me see if I can pull it up here. That was all about vendor communications. So it's this one here. We'll wait for it to load. So the vendor relations committee, librarian vendor relations best practices. So they have put some really important information into this document that I'm going to just mention really briefly here. And there are a few things in the document as well that I will talk about in a little bit more detail during the presentation. One of the things that I think is super crucial throughout all of this is to be saving copies of all the email communications that we've had with the vendor. just for future reference. And this is always comes in handy. The people who do that know it in terms of being able to dig it out, put it back into an email again, where this is the 5th time you've talked to them about such and such problem that you're having, or something that you've specifically asked for in a negotiation that hasn't been addressed yet. Keeping those communications are super important. And then even, 3 years later, when you're starting the renewal negotiation with them, a lot of times you end up going back to the original negotiation for some point of interest that was a point of discussion in the previous negotiation. So that's a really important point from that document. They had another one in here in terms of, they called it a publisher log. So it would be essentially a log of all the communications with the vendor. So I don't do this myself. I do rely on those email threads that I specifically archive into my own cloud file structure. And I save that in the cloud so that my staff can find those correspondence as well. But I like this idea of a log. And there's been a couple times where an email didn't sort of clearly specify the last thing that we decided on, something like this. So having a log would have been helpful in a couple of instances, I can say for sure. And then diarizing to follow up. I don't know about how many of you have had gigantic, long, ongoing conversations that never seem to end with a publisher. So literally just sticking it in the calendar to go after them again on it is another really important point from this particular handout. And then one thing that is a really good part of this document is how to ask for help from the vendor liaison committee. And so you can always keep that in mind. Just don't forget that this is available as an option as well. So from here, I will also say that, oh, sorry, there was my chat showing up, that you can feel free to download and use these checklists and these forms as much as you want. Like my whole mission in life is to make sure that we, like as a profession, are as savvy as possible. So I have no problem with you using these checklists whatsoever. So my next slide, let me get my screen up. There we go. So my next slide here, I've got, of course, I'm not going to spend any time on this because we all live it every day, the shared frustrations that we have on negotiations. So then we all know the issues, we have fewer personnel and resources to be able to intelligently evaluate new products and product renewals. We have fewer information sources to help us determine whether to add or renew a product. Usage statistics are hard to get. Some of us don't even have access to our own budget data, getting a hold of titles lists. So for some of us, product evaluation is not even under our own control. The publishers are challenging to work with. We all know the local folks are trying their best, but often those institutional policies and their global organizational charts are just making it extremely challenging these days. And then the never-ending platform migrations and the resulting changes to the invoicing, the catalog records, the link maintenance. I can just tell you that when VLEX announced the Irwin Law migration in August, I literally closed my laptop, stomped my foot and said, no, like I'm so done with these damn platform migrations. I didn't want to deal with it whatsoever. I think I have platform migration burnout. So anyways, we are all well familiar with these challenges. So here's a few things that that I like to employ as I'm navigating these waters. Gotcha, Jacob. So the first thing that I want to emphasize is that in my world, sales reps do lots of work. So I always make the sales rep come up with the list of all the titles that we currently have compared with their current offering. I have the sales rep set up the spreadsheet. If I want to know the title by title cost, I make them put it together for me for whatever they're trying to sell me. Try to get the usage stats out of them if I can get that for a renewal process. Like if they are trying to sell me something, they're trying to renegotiate something, I make them help me out in the process as much as possible. I don't have the time or the resources to do this. I might have the tools, my catalog might be able to pull up a titles list, but you know what, to be able to compare it against what they're trying to sell me now, I don't have the time for it. If they want to sell it to me, they can do that legwork. The other pieces here, I'm going to have a few more slides to talk about. So automating some processes as much as we can. I'm going to talk about that quite a lot. Doing our own homework. You know, as much as we can try to make the sales person do the work, we always have endless amount of homework to do ourselves. And then my last piece, I'll have a slide and some comments on the customer is always right, and the importance of advocacy for your own cause, essentially. So when we talk about automating, so, you know, we don't have a lot of resources to do this. Our catalogs and our library systems can, you know, sort of approximate a little bit of this, but I haven't found that they do a particularly good job. You know, we might have some good analytics to pull from our ILS. We could do some bulk importing or bulk activation of catalog records, batch changes to links, pulling historical budgetary data. Like we have access to some of these things, but in terms of the actual workflow, there's not a lot that we can do to actually automate for ourselves, except really to create some checklists so that we don't drop the ball on certain things. So the first thing that I just wanted to show you is one of the pieces of the puzzle that I use for automating the purchasing or the renewal process. This is really for first time products. So a sales rep comes to me and this is the first time we're going to be negotiating. I have what I call the electronic negotiations form. So again, this is located on the Toolkit and it looks like this. So it's a pretty big document. I keep adding to it all the time. It's pretty perfected now, but it's all the questions that I've ever asked any sales rep. And as soon as they say, I'm going to sell you this, or are you going to consider this? Then I literally put it in an email to them and I say, fill this in. And I'm not going to talk to you until I see this document. So, you know, Lex is trying to sell us whatever their platform was for ebooks this summer. I was getting the runaround to get some kind of discussion with this guy. I was like, you know what, just fill it out. I'm just going to ask the same questions anyways. So, so ultimately I give it to the salesperson and I tell them right up front that I'm going to correlate the content of this form with the license that I'm signing. We keep a copy of this on file with the license agreement and all the communications that we have with the vendor. And then down below, we have like all the specifics about the product itself and the vendor. I ask them what their preferred payment type is right up front, just so that we know what the platform is in case it sits on a different platform than the publisher itself. So think of Irwin and Felix. What's the length of the contract, renewal date? I ask them every single thing to do with costs. Is it a one-time cost? Are there ongoing maintenance costs or ongoing purchase costs? Looking for the cost of print versus print plus online versus online only. Whether there's consortial agreements in the mix for the university libraries, we can benefit from that for some things. On the ebook side, like, is it a package deal only, or can we do individual title purchases? I also have it in here for them to provide a list of the inflation rate that was charged each year for the last 3 years, and then ask them specifically if they would sign a license agreement that includes an inflation control provision within the license itself. I always ask them about their available access options because we use IP recognition through the proxy server. Ask if the content's available for perpetual or not, whether there's MARC records available, and whether they're included in the purchase price, and whether we can get them to do the editing of the MARC records, and if they have any restrictions about sharing the MARC records. The number of simultaneous users, of course, and how they are serving up their usage statistics. and what standard they're using for usage statistics and how those are actually delivered. Go through some of the functionality on the ebook products. Ask whether they permit crawling by a meta search. We specifically used Alma, the product called, well, this is a bit old, Primo Central Index, but whether they're actually keeping Alma up to date, because that makes our lives a lot easier. Ask whether there's an administrative module. And we specifically tell them that we need rights to make copies for accessible persons with visual disabilities. And then we go through all the copyright questions that are important for us in terms of being able to save in a course management system or a course pack, etc. And then might always end up by asking them if they have an up-to-date proxy stanza, the config file filed with OCLC, because we rely very heavily on those. So that all appears in one big document, and then that is most of the information that I will need in order to make an informed decision. Usually the prices already come in on these things, right? So that'll usually come in with the pricing as well. So that is that negotiation form. Let me go back to my PowerPoint here. So let's see, I talked about this one and this one. Now we can move on. So one of the things that I had talked about in terms of the little summary at the top was do your own homework. So, you know, I know that I don't have time to sit and babysit and hand, you know, spoon feed these publishers and get everything up and running in our environment, but it's necessary. There's nothing we can do to get out of it, pretty much. And we can't afford not to do do our own homework on all of this. So I thought I would just share in this example. This is a spreadsheet that we created during our most recent LMA negotiation with Thomson Reuters. And so this is what we use to gather all information in one place to make cancellation decisions. So I have I have a serials technician who had the list of all of our loose leaf titles with them. And this was not just Thomson Reuters, actually. We were doing a massive review of all of our loose leaves. But ProView was, of course, pretty prominent on here. So I included information about whether we had ProView or print or both. I included on this spreadsheet, there was also a little note area to include information about whether a particular faculty member had requested the title or whether it was on course reserves for someone. And as part of the process of doing this homework, we were in contact with every faculty member to find out if they were still using that particular product and what format they preferred it in today. Then in the spreadsheet itself, I set out the base price in the previous LMA and the delivery charge. So this would be the last year of our last LMA. And then I totaled everything up, including the delivery charge. And then I just had a separate column for what we paid in the previous 2 years. And then for ProView, I could never get usage statistics from them. So I just bit the bullet for this. This was a huge, massive project. We needed usage statistics. So I had them pull it off the proxy server, which is the only thing I could get access to. And it served the purpose. And we were able to plug this in as well in order to come up with a cost per use calculation. And as we went through, I just kind of made an upper limit and a mid-level limit. So if it was costing us more than $150 per use or something like this, I'd highlight it in red. If it was getting pretty expensive, I'd highlight in orange. And then, of course, we also plugged in the proposed cost on the new LMA. And then after that, we had all of this in one spreadsheet, and we were able to look at the usage, the cost per use, the course reserves information, the print versus online, and then the librarians and I went through it line by line, literally, to look at all of those information pieces to make a determination, so the librarians know what the public are using and what the students are using, like at the reference desk. And they also have the radar, in terms of faculty who like a particular product or whatever. So we took all of that information and then we went line by line to decide whether we were going to keep it in print, online, or both. And from my perspective, like, I cannot have an informed negotiation until all of these information pieces are gathered up. I know it's a major time drain for sure. And I'm very fortunate that I do have staff who populate certain aspects of the spreadsheet. And then of course the librarians with their good knowledge of our collection and our user needs. So all of that went together to make it an informed negotiation. So my next slide are sort of my little advice. The customer is always right. So this is really the stance that I take as the customer, which is, you know what, I hold the purse strings, right? Like, we hold the purse strings. We're talking hundreds, like in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a contract. So I just want to remind every beleaguered law librarian out there that you hold the purse strings. You do not have to sign anything until you are ready to do so. You are entitled to ask questions. You are entitled to ask the sales rep to give you any information that you need for making your decision. You're entitled to say no to contract provisions. You should review the contract carefully prior to signing. I don't know about you guys, but I find tons of errors in every contract that I review. And it's things that the legal department missed because they're using standard contract terms. And, you know, we should always ask questions about any term in the contract that needs to be clarified. I send suggested wording if I need clarification on a contract term. And I will refuse to sign until all of my requests are satisfied in some respect. So for example, in our most recent negotiation with Thomson Reuters for our new LMA, because we're currently in a temporary location on campus and we have limited visitors to the law library in person, so we have no desire and no capacity to get print loose leaf updates right now. So I refuse to sign the LMA to anyone who would listen to me until I had it in writing somewhere that we would be able to get our full replacement set of our loose leaf collection in print at the time of our choosing. And that was super important for so many reasons. I would also say, just you can see on the end of this, that you can always call, call on call members, either through a special interest group or through the list for advice and assistance. And again, the vendor liaison committee can also assist on some things, just in terms of like group advocacy. And I have another example of this in a minute. So this slide, I take the Harvard reading, that 10 hard bargaining tactics to watch out for in negotiation. And what I do here on the left is, so first of all, let me just say that there's dozens of articles out there on the topic. This is a short reading, it gives some basics, but I would just recommend that you at least read one book or one article or take one workshop on negotiation skills so that you can recognize some of these tactics. So on the left column here, I show the tactic as described in the Harvard article. And then in the center, I provide sort of what we've witnessed in the law library world in terms of that tactic. And then in the third column, I give a pretty much unhelpful but possible responses to the tactic. So this is mostly for comedic purposes, but anyways. So one of the tactics that we do see from our vendors is what Harvard calls a commitment tactic. And so what it'll translate to in the law library world is, I'll have to check with legal on that, and then they'll have to go away for a while. And so like whenever that happens, which is all the time, so I will say, this contract term is unclear, I need it to be revised to this. This contract term doesn't even apply, and I need this inserted into the contract as well. So the response is, oh, I have to check with legal on that. So my response always is, fine, you go ahead, do that, no problem. And then pretty much ignore them and keep persisting in tracking down and getting those provisions somehow acknowledged in the document itself. So I just persist with it despite that particular tactic. So the other tactic that the Harvard reading points out that we see in law libraries is the take it or leave it negotiation strategy, which is this is a one-time offer, or ooh, this is super urgent. If you don't act now, and we see this in life too, right? So in the law library world, my most recent example, everybody heard about it on the listserv, was when I sent a particular publisher my list of titles that I wanted to add to our contract, and I sent it in February. And then essentially 3 days before the actual license was to expire, I got the response back. So February, it's due April 31st. I get a response on April 27th. And the answer was, oh, and by the way, I was like, well, I'll take a look and get back to you. Thank you. And the response was, well, just so that you know, the market price will set in once the previous contract expires. So I'll need your response by Friday. So literally, I had the stuff to them 4 months in advance or 3 months in advance, and they gave me 3 days to actually contemplate the whole thing. So what do we do in a situation like this? Let me see if this works. I'm just gonna pull it up. I hope you're laughing right now. Oh, you can't see it. Oh, it's so sad. So sad. I'm gonna share it. There we go. Here we go. There's my response. Okay, now I hope you're laughing. So when I get tactic like that, I am just so peeved. You can't even imagine. So thank you, Bronwyn, thank you. So in this particular example, I literally wrote a response to the person to say, I categorically reject your attempts to use time to pressure me into signing this contract without properly reviewing it. And I copied their supervisors all the way to the top of the heap and said, desist from this. I'm not going to fall for it, but nice try. Literally, but nice try. And then I proceeded to put it out into the call universe, where I proceeded to find out at least 4 other call members had suffered from the same negotiation tactic. And as soon as it went out on the list, the VLC got a hold of it and went after them and started demanding answers on that tactic as well. So that's where I say, you know, use the power of the whole to vent and get some, you know, get it off your chest and get after them. Like, there's no reason when you're dropping 100 and something thousand with these companies that they should be treating you like this at all. And I refuse to put up with it, and they know it. So, and this has happened to me, oh my gosh, how many times? So I've had a problem with my invoice, the way my invoices have been done. Of course, we all have. But this is worse. So I essentially refused to pay an invoice because it was wrong by $30,000, essentially. And so I get an email. So I get an email from their accounts receivable department that says, you better pay this. And then 1 month later, and I sent all the stuff to that guy to explain why I hadn't paid it, which includes like 4 email threads to the sales reps, of course. Then on the next month, I get another email from accounts receivable with lettering this big saying, you better pay now or else all your subscriptions are going to be shut down. And I, again, sent an email to that person with a copy to the previous AR person that I sent all the stuff to, plus the 2 sales reps, plus everybody to the top of the Canada-wide group, and said, really, I have, you know, we have this massive amount of money. We dropped so much money with you guys, and the invoicing problem is on your end, and you're sending me big scary emails about how I'm going to get cut off. And by the way, here's the email thread 5 times now that I've sent out. And I literally put, by the way, I have now spent 7 hours on this matter, right? And so, and you know what? Getting really mad in an email thread and showing like how much time I have spent on this, it is generally effective. I get emails from top people quite often saying, sorry, Annette, let me take care of this. And 5 minutes later, something small is fixed. Some of the big things are not fixed, but the small ones get addressed pretty quickly. So yeah, this is my little soapbox about not putting up with it from the vendors. So let's go. So the next part of the presentation, I'm talking a little bit about process of following up. So following up on a negotiation. So now the contract has been signed. What do we do next to make sure that it is a successful implementation, if you want to call it that? So in our environment, I've created a series of checklists that it just helps me to remember all the things that I need to do in order to get from point A to point B. So for this process, I use my checklists, and I'll show you those in 1 second. I review the new incoming invoices with like a fine-tooth comb to make sure that I'm being charged properly and in accordance with the contract pricing that was set out. And we know this has become absolutely crucial these days. So that's a big piece of it. Of course, we have the staff to go through and check our access title by title. Another gigantic project that, thanks very much vendors, we have to do and suffer through. I do go after usage data as much as I possibly can. And then I always keep the previous year's pricing handy for future negotiations. So this is, I'm going to go over now to look at some of the checklists. These are included on the Toolkit, that website as well. So I've got a few things that we use. So these are, again, just workflow reminders, and one of them is sort of an aid to decision making. So one of the ones that I use right off the bat for when I do a new purchase is my new product checklist. I'm just trying to share that. It's going to reload. Okay. So on this, again, all I'm doing is like filling the gaps in my brain because I don't have time to remember to do all of this stuff every single time we are going through this. So I just created a big document that is just a reminder for me of what needs to be done. So when we have a new product that we've purchased, I grab the URL. We can set up a product demo if we have to. We issue the PO and cataloging gets done for that. I have a renewal spreadsheet that it's a serial renewal spreadsheet where we literally track all of the prices that we're paying and what's been canceled and what we're keeping. Paying the invoice, of course, like these ones are easy, but the ones that I forget would be, you know, notifying people that the product is ready on the publisher's side, going after the stanzas for the proxy server and sending those to our IT department. Making sure that the URL comes out of the proxy server on the other end and goes back to the tech staff to get it into the catalog records, and then making sure that reference staff know it's even available, putting it on our website, organizing training for it, and getting usage statistics for it. So if I didn't have all this written down, like my girls would be able to handle the first 6 things by themselves. They just do that as routine for their workflow, but the rest of this would fall off my radar. So this is how I kind of keep track of this sort of thing. The next one that I will show you is a renewals checklist that we use. So it's the same kind of thing. Again, just to remind me of what we need to do when we're going through a renewal process. So the invoice comes in or the statement comes in. I'll do like the basic product review, which is what's the new pricing against the previous year's pricing? Do I have usage stats on it? Do I have cost per use on it? And then, of course, when we thumbs up on renewing it, the invoice gets paid, all of the access gets tested. I go back in and look at the catalog entry one more time, just because sure enough, something will have changed and the catalog record is a bit of out of sync with what the product is actually doing or whatever. So I'll go in and review the catalog entry and then double check the stanza and the website to make sure all that information is up to date as well. And then of course, when my staff are filling this out, they'll fill it out with the invoice and then send it to me. So we are always sort of archiving these, but they'll send me the current cost versus the prior year's cost. And then I plug the usage into it if I've got it. So that's an example. You might find a few little sort of proprietary things on the bottom. You can just ignore those. So that's my renewals checklist. I've got a couple of others that I use as well, including my cancellations checklist. Let's go here. Same thing. You know, did we get rid of the catalog record? Did we update our renewal spreadsheet? Did we get that electronic collection pulled out of the catalog? Try, you know, whether there's a credit note or a refund coming. And then taking the stanza out of the proxy server, notifying reference that the product has been canceled. And when I say reference, I also mean faculty pretty much, pulling it off the website. Oh, there's the notify patrons. And then updating our usage stats tracker. And I have a statistical entry guide that reminds us of all the usernames and passwords for all the admin interfaces where we can grab user data. So get those updated so that that product's not in there anymore. The last one that I have is a troubleshooting checklist. And it's the same thing again, you know, if an error is reported, this is me troubleshooting in the early days saying, okay, let's see, is the proxy server even working? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, restart the proxy server. If everything else is working, check to make sure we've renewed it. Check that the vendor has the right IP range and hasn't implemented any server changes. And then just double check that we've got the same URL in the catalog as we have coming off the proxy server. Then going to OCLC website to make sure that we have the most recent stanza. That's probably the one that breaks our stuff the most, is when they make a platform change and our stanza gets out of sync. Making changes to the proxy server, making sure then that that URL gets transferred back to the tech staff so they can put it into the records, making sure the website gets updated again with the new URL, and then making sure that everybody who knew about the error gets notice that the problem has been resolved. So, you know, any one of these things can just fall off the radar in a split second on a busy day, as you all know. So that's me just trying to keep myself organized on all this stuff. So the last few things here, one of them is this. So in the follow-up and tracking department, the idea about reviewing the new incoming invoices. So, you know, this is a super important part of the negotiation process. And it's really ensuring that we're being properly charged according to the contract terms. Excuse me. So this is an example of a spreadsheet that I created to document all the invoicing issues that we experienced when we recently consolidated all of our Westlaw add-ons into one agreement. So we'd already paid for the yearly subscriptions, but then the consolidation occurred in the middle of the year. So every single product price needed to be prorated in the new contract. So on this spreadsheet, I made a note of the product name, when the current agreement expired, the price that we had already paid for it, and then broken down monthly. And then this is essentially when we should, you know, when the new billing should have started, kicked in. And then trying to figure out how much credit we should have been given. So just as an example, to see sort of how to navigate some of this. At that point, you know, it became like, this became sort of the beast that we used for the past like 3 months to try to figure out what our actual proper invoice amount should be. Because when the big invoice arrived that had not taken any of this into consideration, you can imagine how how happy I was about the whole thing. Still not sorted out, by the way, but we're getting there. So, and on the process of follow-up and tracking, of course, we have the lovely job of checking that we have access to everything. So as I say, I'm very lucky to have staff to be able to help me with this. But what we ended up doing for this particular link checking was to go through every single product that we had. So that would be like Litigator or, you know, Paper Source, and then every single product that was in there to see whether we had a record for it in our catalog, to see whether we had a working link for it, and then to see whether Westlaw was actually letting us through into the product, which they weren't in several instances. And then URL changes that needed to be made, and then ultimately whether the matter was fixed. So we all know these projects just never end these days. So this is, just an example of a tool that I put together to try to get a systematic approach to checking all of our access. Now, next one here. We all know the importance of trying to get usage statistics out of these vendors, and then keeping that previous year's pricing. So those are some of my thoughts from my observations about the negotiations that I've been involved with in the past a little while. I'm really curious to see what people are interested in talking about, or some experiences that other people have had. So hopefully people are able to kind of put up your hands and participate in some discussion now.
Yeah, thank you so much. So first, Annette, my apologies if my introduction was subpar. I was flustered from our technical difficulties. But please know the subcommittee is thrilled to have you present on this topic. Your credentials are inspiring, but also personally, I just feel like I have learned something from you every time we've had a conversation over the years. So thank you. And second, I think everyone can appreciate the practicality of this presentation and can probably relate to a few, if not all, of the situations that you have referenced. And these checklists will definitely be a valuable resource. So if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button in the taskbar and clicking raise hand, and I can call on you. You can unmute, share your screen. I see Bronwyn has one already, if you want to take that, Annette.
Wow. What's the most effective way to find contact information for reps? Well, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I think, I've used everything in the book essentially, which is people that I've met, like business cards that I have from going to conferences to going to LinkedIn, which I don't even have a LinkedIn account. So one time recently, I literally went to Vicky and Tamaris and said, does anybody have a LinkedIn account? I can't get a hold of this person. But most of the time I already have them in my contacts, or I already have them in a particular thread that I've dealt with them in the past. And I also save, as I say, I save those threads. So, and I also save specifically every time we get an email saying, oh, here's your new sales rep. I save that and I label it in my cloud so that I can see who the new contact's going to be, and I update my contacts as well. But in terms of that, anybody have any other ideas to answer Bronwyn? Kim, thank you so much. Very, very, my pleasure to share for sure. Ooh, there you go. Amy says, just ask your colleagues, because somebody might have it in their back pocket. That's a good answer for sure. People can talk on here. I'm sure there's gotta be some war stories out there.
I'll unmute and say, I just sent angry emails to 3 or 4 people at Thomson Reuters, and that usually produces their boss. So
exactly.
Annette, I was going on camera here and was just going to ask you a couple more questions, if that's okay, and please, if anyone else wants to jump in, do so. Curious, there's the inevitable foot dragging, and I'm happy to be in a position where I don't necessarily, I'm not dealing with a whole campus of subscriptions. It's just essentially one law firm. Curious though, if there is foot dragging, have you had a lot of success with being like, well, look, you can foot drag as much as you want. We're not paying more than what we're currently paying if you don't want to get a contract in place by the time we expire. So for example, where I say, hi, so our contract expires at the end of this month. We've been talking about it for 6 months. We haven't got to a place where we need to be. You're threatening to say oh, well, what's going to happen on April 1st or something like that. And do you just take the route you've talked about and just say, well, that's ridiculous. You've had every opportunity to get a contract in place and we're going to stop paying invoices full stop? Or does the new invoice come and it's just the exact same amount? It's more that last bit I'm curious about.
Interesting. Yeah, I can say first of all that I've had one particular sales rep that never responded to any email I've ever sent. So I literally just picked up the phone and called them. And that because we deal in email so much, so that like kind of shocked them, and they actually picked up the phone and started talking to me. In terms of, does the new invoice come? It generally does, and your contract terms will tell you that like there might be something in there about automatic renewal. In fact, when I got threatened with oh, you're going to get cut off, I went and looked, and there was something about automatic renewal for a month or something in the contract anyways. So yeah, that's an interesting question for sure. And that's why I diarize. Like I literally, but once every 2 weeks, okay, waiting for this status report, please. Those didn't help that much in that particular round of it, but picking up the phone definitely was useful.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess the other question I had is recently, I'm sure most folks would have gotten this email from their rep seeing content disappear from, for example, the litigator module. And I'm curious about, I understand, hey, we're updating our software. We no longer have the ability to offer discrete chapters, therefore it's disappearing. Here's an ebook instead that hasn't been updated since 2018. And I'm curious, just like, is anyone planning to address that? Are you planning to address that with those sorts of negotiations? Or when you're dealing with the volume that you're dealing with, is it just like, you know what, a couple of ebook chapters here and there aren't really going to make or break anything? It's not really worth discussing.
Yeah, that is a huge question for sure. That has come on my radar more than once, where content has disappeared from criminal source or something like that. And this time around, I really did try to pin it to them to get the content listing actually in the deal. And I don't think it ever actually showed up in the deal, but I have so much correspondence back and forth with them on a spreadsheet testing all the access that I don't know. I've never been told by them that, oh, sorry, that's not part of it. The only thing I was ever told is not part of criminal source and labor source are all the ProView titles that show up underneath of it, even though, so you're not subscribed to ProView, so they still show up there. So I've said to them before, you should put a lock icon next to the things that are locked down on here so that it becomes more apparent for users. But yeah, I don't think I have too much help to say, but there's a few things happening in the chat that might be helpful here too.
Thank you, Annette.
No, for sure. Let's see what people are saying. I'm just trying to get okay, so let's see. What do we got here? We have, oh my goodness.
I've been keeping tabs on it if you want me to jump in.
It's all right, for sure. So Jennifer, we get pricing that's way out of whack with what other regions in Canada pay, even within our firm. And Susanna, on the question of how to get a hold of the higher ups, she says that she's asked people that she has good relationships with in the same company if they know how to get a hold of the person. And then Alex, how far in advance do you start the negotiation process? And do you start the process or do you let the rep reach out first? I think it depends on what it is, right? So if it's a renewal process, they'll usually send you either a notice that the renewal is coming, or they'll send you a renewal invoice a couple months in advance. If it's something new that you are actually pursuing, that's a different topic. So I don't know if you want to sort of expand on that, Alex. And then Eve says that she asked the rep specifically about the escalation process. So that's useful to know for sure, Eve. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea for sure. And as supported by Michael. Oh, and Eve always takes the automatic renewal clause out. So that's good to know as well. So Naomi's asking about the negotiation checklist for usage statistics standards. When a vendor claims they provide counter stats, have you subsequently experienced they seem unable to respond to your request for a specific type of counter compliant report? And if so, have you in the next contract tried to spell out more explicitly what type of usage reporting? So the answer is yes. I think we have all experienced this where usage statistics are all over the map. There's some that are compliant. Most of the law ones are not compliant. And to be honest, it's not something that I've ever really got hung up on in the negotiation process. It's so relevant. You're right. And it probably should play a bigger role in the negotiation. I haven't really gone to bat on that issue, to be honest. I would usually have bigger fish to fry on that, sadly. Let's see here. What can I do if I negotiated print in tandem with the electronic product for a loose leaf and then the print never arrives? Is that an opportunity to adjust the cost for next year? The rep has ghosted me despite monthly reminder that the print is not coming. Wow, yeah, that's a big issue that I don't really have an answer for. I mean, if you have a contract where the print is in the mix and you are not getting your updates, then presumably you should be pursuing a credit note on it, I would assume. Anybody have any other thoughts on that? Because yeah, that is super frustrating for sure. And if you have a list or documented what the price is and how many updates you were expecting, and then can sort of cross-reference that to how many updates you have received, then you can provide them with evidence of what the credit ought to be. Something like that. I don't know. I'm curious to know what other people think about that. Can we speak further on Jennifer's comment about costs? I'd be interested if anyone knows why there's a price differential. Wow, that's a big question for sure. Karen, anybody have any ideas on this? Honestly, my thought on all of this is that they will take whatever rope we give them. So I will just say that I'm pretty sure over the years, I've paid way less than some of the other universities that I know for certain things, because I always play the poor card. Like, I'm just like, I'm at poor little University of Windsor here. We do not have the budget for this. I'm happy. If you would like some money from me, this is what I can pay. And I've made some reasonable ground on those kind of that approach to negotiations for more than one type of product in the past. So it's worth a shot, right? But in terms of why, because they can get away with it. That's what I'm going to say. I don't know if it's true. Do you have any advice about how to get out of non-disclosure clauses? Amy, you have a thought on this. I think you should tell us what you think about it. You're a lawyer too. Come on.
I don't have a good thought, and I was hoping you would. We have tried to negotiate out of them, but it sort of goes against, if you're trying to get a good price and say you're poor, sometimes the trade is, well, then you better not tell anyone else. And I'm uncomfortable with that. And then sometimes, even without getting a good price, that seems to be one of the clauses they're least likely to budge on in a negotiation. I think it really works against us working together, and that's what they want. And I would love to do something a little different. I think part of it is if we can work consortially where possible, but we just don't have that much of that here in law. There's Nellie, if not Nellie, there's New England Law Library Consortium, NELCO. And there's a bit through the academics, but it would be great if we could find other ways to use our bargaining power together to negotiate with model terms and things like that. So those are my only thoughts, but I feel like we're far away from that.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, right? Nobody has time to organize all this, but I would say 10 years ago, I took a little class in Toronto. I think it was through I don't know, it was a continuing legal education course. And it was about negotiating long-term technology platform contracts. And one of the senior lawyers who's been doing technology contracts for decades. And one of the things that he said that I always will remember is that he asks, as part of the negotiation, for a grid that shows what every other customer has been paying. Every other customer in the region has been paying before he'll sign anything with them. And I was like, we should do that. And that would totally get around the non-disclosure cost as well, or the non-disclosure clause as well. I loved that idea. And I think I've raised it a couple times, but again, it's like a lot of work to actually bring something like that to fruition, Yeah. So yeah, really good points for sure. Research monitor. Let's see, one log. Yeah, VLC can also help escalate issues. I've also played the poor card, got it. So to keep track of usage statistics for online sources, what are people's experience with OneLog? Does anyone have any alternatives? Somebody uses Research Monitor, somebody else uses OneLog. So that, any other answers to that question? I literally just use Excel. I have a gigantic Excel spreadsheet with my usage stats on it. One log, okay.
I was just going to chime in on usage statistics. There's like, oh, very odd usage statistic available through my account for Westlaw. And it's like at the bottom of your list of users, it's like download list of users, and it tells you like the last time each user logged in. And it's gotta be wrong because it's just showing like horrific usage from people who swear they were just in Westlaw yesterday. I'm curious if you have any insight into that, like, interesting thing, Annette.
You know what? At this moment in time, I can't even get into my account. Our credentials, we literally click on the link for it and it just shows a dead page. So it's not too much help on that, but I can tell you that there was a point in time about 4 or 5 years ago where the directors, I think it was the directors of the academics, got together and were really agitating about usage statistics for ProView. And we literally like peppered the reps at the conference about it. And there was a guy standing there on the one side saying, I'm pretty sure we can. And then most of them are saying, I'm pretty sure we can't. And then on my phone calls over the past summer with Mike Lemire and Sal Maladino, they're both saying, oh yeah, we can get you usage statistics, no problems. I do not know. Jacob, sorry about that.
No worries. I was just going to post it in the chat. I was just going to say just a shameless plug for the VLC's upcoming Thomson Reuters meeting. I sent another email around to call, and there is a link in yesterday's in session. If you have any issues with Thomson Reuters, please fill out the survey because we will be talking to them early in November. So
that was a perfect segue. Use the VLC. Did I ever get the ProView usage statistics? No, I did not. Okay, great. It's good to see everybody, by the way. I hope you found the session to be useful. And just if you want to send me an email or anything, just let me know if you need anything else. So.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Annette, for sharing your time and knowledge. And thank you again to the call executive who have made the webinars more accessible. It's great to see so many people participating today. And thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you have a great day, rest of day, whatever time zone you are in. So thank you, Annette.
Thank you. Take care, guys.